Hey everyone, this is Michael. Welcome back to another video. Thanks for visiting the channel. And today we have a different kind of video where we're going to look into a psychological aspect of battling for your unfairly taken security deposit. So today's video is called The 5 Types of Landlords Most Likely to Steal Your Deposit. And the reason this information is valuable is because if you get into a legal dispute with a landlord over your security deposit, it can be really helpful to have a little psychological insight into what drives them, why they take the money, how they see it, because it can help you predict how the process will unfold. For example, some landlords will opt to settle a lawsuit right away. Some will fight to the bitter end in court. Some might even not show up in court. And so if you have some insight beforehand, it can help smooth the process. It's also meant to be a little humorous because, generally speaking, this is a stressful issue for most tenants, even though the reality of the process is that it's really quite simple. It's not complicated. It doesn't take a lot of hours of work to do. And when it's done, you'll be glad that you pursued it because you will have learned something and you will have gained some self-esteem in the process. So let's take a look at these 5 profiles. And before we get started, I want to be clear, nothing in this video is legal advice. What I have today might contain legal information, and it might contain my opinion, which is not legal advice. I can't tell you what to do in your situation, but I can tell you what I've seen in terms of the type of personalities. So we're going to go through these just really briefly, just to give you an idea of what you might be encountering. And so the first type of personality or landlord type would be the rookie, right? So the rookie is someone who's just brand new to being a landlord. Maybe you're literally their first tenant, or they're new enough that they've never had any conflict, okay? And so what they do generally when they overcharge or take too much, it's not malicious. It's just based on them not really being clear or really understanding what's allowed and what's not. And so a typical thing might be some just generic move-out charge, which is never allowed, right? And so they might do something like that. They might miss a deadline because they don't know. They might not use the state-approved language. Some states actually have literal word-for-word phrases that need to go in a letter, or the itemized deduction just might be vague. Just say deductions, $1,200 and nothing else. And so with the rookie, what I think is likely to happen is that they're likely to settle before going to court. They'll settle at the demand letter stage because they're just generally not aware that they've made a mistake that could land them in trouble in court. And so they will look to avoid that outcome. From what I've seen, those ones are relatively easy to deal with. Okay. All right, let's move on to the second one. This one is a more annoying type, but also more comical. And this is the entitled landlord. The entitled landlord just basically feels entitled to have everything restored perfect at your expense, okay? And so they will overcharge for whatever they're going to deduct. You know, you might have a little tiny nail hole and they're going to want to repaint the entire house, like that kind of thing. And they might do things that are really over the top, like send you a bill for the lunch that they bought on the day they had to deal with fixing your place. Like, I've actually seen that. That was comical, and I thought it was really funny, and it was so over the top that the person dealing with it kind of diffused the situation for them, and they realized that they were dealing with a bit of a ridiculous personality. And so they basically charge for whatever feels fair to them personally, right? That's the essence of entitlement. So the downside of dealing with this type of personality is that they are not likely to settle at the demand letter stage. They will likely feel offended that you don't agree with their entitlement, okay? And so no big deal. You just keep the process going. Well, you can keep the process going. And because of that personality type, they're probably unlikely to take anyone else's opinion as true except the judge or even the judge. And so with the entitled landlord, you may have to take the process all the way through to court, and the landlord still might not agree. They might not agree with the law, and that's fine, because once they lose in court, they're going to pay you. And so that's the entitled landlord. Now, the third type of landlord I think personally is the easiest to deal with. It usually settles the fastest, and that's the anxious landlord. The anxious landlord makes everything about money. And so any damage to the apartment, it's not about, like with the entitled, where they feel the apartment needs to stay absolutely perfect. For them, every piece of damage is just an immediate calculation in the mind of how much is this going to cost me? Is this going to ruin my investment, right? And so the anxiety over the money is what drives their decisions. And so initially, they might start to bill you for everything because they're thinking, oh my God, if I have to repair this, I must make the tenant pay for it, okay? And so they're also likely to try and calm their anxiety with your money, all right? And so these types of personalities, they overcharge, but the good news is that when they get the demand letter, right? If the suing tenant sends them a demand letter, and the demand letter has a nice big number in it in terms of what the tenant is suing for or threatening to sue for, that fans the flames of their financial anxiety quite a lot, because they're already looking at the dollars they have to spend for the repair and hoping your deposit covers it. And now they're looking at a number that could be twice as much or even 3 times as much in some states. And so then it becomes a big number. And because they're anxious, they're very likely to call a lawyer. If they have a lawyer, then they're immediately thinking, this is going to cost me another $500 to $1,000. If they don't have a lawyer, then it gets more fun, because the lawyer they call says, we can take your case, but we need a $5,000 retainer. And so now the anxious landlord is losing their mind. And so they immediately think, what is the fastest, cheapest way I can get out of this? And the answer to that question is to settle the case at the demand letter phase. And so the anxious landlord rarely ever goes to court, right? It's highly unlikely. And so that's one which for the tenant is very fast and inexpensive to settle, because resolution at the demand letter phase can take as little as 7 days, maybe 14, and can cost you, will always cost you like under $75. So if you use my product, you'll pay $49 for the product and about $11 for a certified letter. So that's $60, and that would most likely settle your problem with the anxious landlord. Okay, so let's move on to the fourth one. This is one I call the pillager or the predator. This is a difficult one. The predator is, just like the word says, he or she is a predator, and you are the prey. They're there to take your money. So what they do is they strike first and just say, hey man, ball's in your court. What are you going to do about it? I took your money. And so they're often organized, which means they'll send you the itemized deduction list on time, and everything will be there. It might be completely unreasonable. It might be full of things that are not your fault or not your responsibility, but it'll be presented correctly because they know what they're doing, right? So assuming that the charges are unjust or overblown or completely wrong, or just full of stuff that is completely illegal, like move-out fees, the predator will still say, what are you going to do about it? That's what they'll send you their bill, they'll take your money, and they say, hey, what are you going to do, right? And so the predator only respects strength, right? So what you have to do is, well, what a tenant will likely do, and to be careful what I say, I'm not trying to give legal advice, I'm not telling anyone what to do, but what a tenant might choose to do in this situation is dig in and prepare to fight the whole way. Because when a predator receives a demand letter, that's not court. That's just a threat to court. Why would the predator respond to that? There's nothing that happens to them if they don't. You understand? And so the next step would be serving them, filing a lawsuit, and serving them. And then they get the notice. And that's when they start to think, okay, this person is serious. And even then, they might say, I'm not going to do anything today. I've got 30 days. The lawsuit is in for 30 days. And then 29 days later, they call you. And they say, hey, let's negotiate. I'll give you half your money back. They will always try to negotiate, right? Because they're in it for the money. They're going to take whatever they can get. And so it's up to the tenant at that point to decide, is this good enough? Maybe they've offered half the money back. Is that good enough? It's still a big improvement over where they were, and that's good. Or does the tenant want to take the gamble and go to court? If a tenant feels really solidly about their case, then they might go to court. And you might find that if a tenant rejects the creditor's first offer, the creditor will come back with a better offer the next day, because the creditor is an established business person, most likely, right? They don't want a loss on their record. They definitely don't want they don't want to pay extra, like they don't want to deal with a double or triple multiplier. But for ego's sake, they really just don't want to lose in court. And so that's the leverage the tenant has, is hanging that over their head that they might lose. Okay, and so with the creditor, the most likely course of action is that the tenant has to take this all the way to the end and be prepared to take it all the way to the end. All right, the fifth personality type is what I call the ostrich, which is a reference to hiding one's head in the sand. The ostrich is by far the most annoying landlord to deal with. And you might consider this, you might think of this as the goat of all landlords, right? Meaning the greatest of all times, in terms of how annoying and difficult they are to deal with. The ostrich has a really simple strategy, which is just ignore everything, okay? And I mean everything. They don't send your deposit back on time. They don't respond to any emails or texts or letters or any kind of communication. They just completely ignore you, right? You might say, hey, I'm going to sue you. They're going to ignore you. You might send them a legal demand letter, probably still going to ignore you. You might send them a summons and file a court case. They're going to ignore you. They may show up to court or they may not, right? And if they don't show up, they lose a default judgment. If they do show up and lose, they also face the judgment, but they're prepared not to pay. Which seems unfair, but for those of you who are new to this, the court doesn't collect the money for you. There's an assumption that the loser will pay the money because there are legal repercussions of not paying, such as having a lien put on the property, or wage garnishment. And those steps of remediation, they're up to the plaintiff to take. And so if you get a judgment against an ostrich type and they don't pay, now you have to chase them. You have to go after it, okay? And so this type of landlord, generally speaking, is either very old, like, in the 90s, where they just don't care, because at some point, I think, and I probably would feel this way if I was in my 90s too, like, I wouldn't care. If they don't expect to be alive that much longer, they're probably not going to put much energy into paying you. The other type is one who doesn't live locally. They could be either halfway across the country, definitely in another state, and possibly out of the country. Out of the country is a really difficult one. I would strongly recommend that you simply never rent a property from a landlord who lives out of the country, even if you're dealing with a property management company, because if you have to sue them, you don't sue the management company, you sue the landlord. And so that's a situation where it's like brutally difficult to collect. And you might not. So if you have this situation, you might seriously consider your options. You can sue on principle and you can try to collect. Maybe you can put a lien on the property, maybe you can get something. But if it's a small amount, a few $100, $300, $200, you might say, you know what, I'm never going to get this money, or it's too much work. This is literally the only time I would ever consider something too much work or just not worth it. And so this is a difficult personality, and you really won't know what you're dealing with until they don't show up in court. That's when you know for sure, for certain, that you have an ostrich type. Prior to that, it's a fine line between ostrich and predator, because the predators will ignore you too. Okay, so there's your 5 types. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you're in this situation, my condolences. And I have a great program to help you get through it. It's an AI program that works with either ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini. And it turns those flagship models into your personal case manager. It will make sure that you do everything in the right order. It will make sure everything's done correctly, especially the language for your demand letter. It'll find court forms for you, show you how to fill them out. And it will make the process completely smooth and easy for you, as easy as it can be. And in the description below, you'll find a link to my website and a link to the product. And if you have any questions, there's a contact email on that website. You can email me. And like I said earlier, I can't give you legal advice, but I can certainly help you with the product and getting it set up and getting it working and any technical questions you might have. And I appreciate you watching this video. If you liked it, comment, subscribe, and I'll be putting out more videos on this subject from different angles and different perspectives. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.